For decades, the African continent was often perceived through a narrow lens, a passive battleground for external powers, a source of raw materials, or a recipient of conditional aid. Its sovereignty was frequently overlooked, its agency dismissed. Now that paradigm is fundamentally shifting. Africa is asserting its own interests, forging new alliances, and in doing so, it is unsettling established global hierarchies. The West, accustomed to its historical influence, is visibly nervous. A new geopolitical contest is undeniably brewing, and this time Africa stands not as a periphery, but at its very epicenter. Let us be precise in our terminology. A Cold War does not signify direct military confrontation between major powers. Instead, it denotes a protracted period of intense geopolitical rivalry characterized by proxy conflicts, ideological competition, economic coercion, and strategic military posturing. This intricate dance of power, often conducted through covert operations and diplomatic maneuvering, is precisely what we are witnessing unfold across the African continent today. On one side stand the traditional Western powers, the United States, France, and the broader NATO alliance, seeking to maintain their historical influence and strategic access. Opposing them, or rather offering an alternative, are Africa's emerging partners, Russia, China, and the expanding bloc of BRICS nations. This dynamic is not merely a shift in allegiances, it represents a fundamental reevaluation of global power structures. The visual evidence is compelling, from the strategic overtures at recent Russia-Africa summits to the vast infrastructure projects spearheaded by China. A new geopolitical landscape is rapidly taking shape. Africa is no longer merely accepting peacekeepers, it is actively choosing power players that align with its evolving strategic calculus. The current pushback from African nations is not arbitrary. It is a direct consequence of decades of perceived systemic failures and unfulfilled promises. The post-colonial order, often underpinned by Western-backed governments, frequently led to instability and economic stagnation. Aid packages, while ostensibly beneficial, often came with stringent conditions that undermined national sovereignty and stifled genuine development. Furthermore, so-called peace missions or interventions, particularly from former colonial powers, have in many instances left behind a legacy of chaos, resentment, and a profound sense of betrayal. Consider the recent withdrawals of French troops from Mali and Niger, or the widespread public discontent against IMF policies in nations like Ghana. These are not isolated incidents, they are symptomatic of a broader disillusionment. Countries such as Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Guinea are not merely rejecting the West, they are actively forging new pragmatic alliances. These partnerships, particularly with Russia and China, span military cooperation, economic development, and political alignment, signaling a decisive pivot away from traditional Western influence. This strategic reorientation is driven by a desire for genuine self-determination and a more equitable global order. The strategic approaches of Russia and China in Africa are distinct yet complementary, offering a compelling alternative to the Western model. Russia's engagement often centers on security and military cooperation. It provides security advisors, military training, and weaponry, often with fewer political preconditions than Western counterparts. This direct support addresses immediate security concerns, particularly in regions grappling with insurgency or instability. China's strategy, conversely, is predominantly economic. It involves massive investments in infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, and energy projects, often financed through loans with long repayment periods. Crucially, China's approach is characterized by a policy of non-interference in internal affairs, a stark contrast to the West's emphasis on governance and human rights. Both nations offer something the West has often withheld, a perceived respect for sovereignty and a transactional relationship devoid of overt ideological impositions. In return, Russia gains strategic influence and military access, while China secures access to vital minerals, uranium, gold, lithium, essential for its industrial growth and technological ambitions. This is not merely friendship, it is a sophisticated geopolitical chess game where strategic assets and influence are the ultimate prizes. The rapid shift in African geopolitical alignments has undoubtedly triggered alarm bells in Washington, Paris, and Brussels. The initial Western response has largely been reactive, characterized by a scramble to reassert influence. This includes a renewed emphasis on aid packages, often framed as more transparent or sustainable, and the initiation of new military cooperation deals. There are also concerted efforts to outbid China on infrastructure projects, attempting to demonstrate a competitive alternative. High-profile visits by Western diplomats, such as the U.S. Secretary of State to West Africa, are part of this diplomatic offensive. However, the efficacy of these countermoves remains questionable. The underlying issue is a fundamental misreading of African aspirations. For many African leaders and populations, the current Western overtures are perceived as too little, too late, and often lacking genuine commitment to equitable partnership. The historical baggage of colonialism, interventionism, and conditional aid casts a long shadow. African nations have now experienced a taste of genuine independence, an independence that extends beyond political liberation to economic and strategic autonomy. They are increasingly unwilling to revert to a subordinate role in the global order. This newfound agency is a powerful force, making it exceedingly difficult for the West to simply reestablish its former dominance. The signs of this escalating geopolitical competition are undeniable and increasingly overt. Consider Niger's decisive action to ban French flights over its airspace, a direct challenge to former colonial authority. Burkina Faso's expulsion of UN agencies signals a clear intent to control its own narrative and operations. Mali's deepening security ties with Russia, including the deployment of Wagner Group personnel, represents a significant strategic pivot. Concurrently, the quiet repositioning of U.S. troops in the region indicates a recognition of the shifting security landscape and a need to adapt. Beyond these specific instances, the broader trend is equally telling. Russia, China, and even India are significantly increasing their diplomatic footprints across the continent, establishing new embassies, expanding trade missions, and fostering cultural exchanges. This is not merely benign cooperation. It is a fierce competition for influence, resources, and strategic positioning. The construction of new satellite bases, port facilities, and extensive embassy compounds across Africa underscores the long-term strategic intent of these global powers. The continent has become a critical arena where the future balance of global power is being actively contested. The unfolding geopolitical dynamics in Africa are not confined to the continent. Their implications reverberate globally, affecting economies, security, and the very fabric of international relations. If you reside in emerging economies like India or Bangladesh, Africa represents a crucial future trade partner, a source of raw materials, and a burgeoning market for your goods and services. Its stability and development directly impact your economic prospects. For citizens in the United States and Europe, this shift signifies a tangible reduction in traditional Western influence and a reevaluation of global power dynamics. The strategic importance of Africa cannot be overstated. It holds the keys to critical green tech minerals, cobalt, lithium, rare earths, essential for the global energy transition. It is a vital component of the global food supply chain, and its naval choke points, particularly in the Red Sea and along the Atlantic coast, are indispensable for international trade and security. This isn't merely about Africa rising, it's about a fundamental rebalancing of global power, a process that will redefine alliances and reshape the international order for decades to come. This is the profound geopolitical shift, the true Cold War, that demands our urgent attention and analytical scrutiny. The mainstream headlines may not frame it this way, and conventional news narratives might overlook its profound implications. Yet, make no mistake, a new Cold War is not merely on the horizon, it is already here, unfolding with strategic precision across the African continent. This time, however, Africa is not a passive pawn in a larger game. It is an active, decisive player, asserting its sovereignty and charting its own course in a multipolar world. Its agency is undeniable, its ascent unstoppable. To truly comprehend the intricate layers of this evolving global power struggle, to understand what is genuinely happening beneath the surface of diplomatic rhetoric and economic figures, you need in depth analysis. Subscribe to Politics, Power, and Policy, your essential source for critical insights into the geopolitical forces shaping our world. Engage with us, like and share your perspectives, join the conversation that defines our collective future. And until next time, my friends, stay safe and informed.